Well, on the Democratic side, our most recent Loras poll has some probably surprising results to a few people, including myself, which was basically a maintenance of the position of Hillary Clinton at the top of the pack. So back in December we polled and we found her at 59% support amongst likely Democratic voters, and that's where we found her again. Senator Sanders we found at 30%, so it's a pretty wide gap between the two, although we did see a bump up for Senator Sanders compared to our December poll. So that result is going to, I think, be met with happiness by some and skepticism by others, but when you draw a sample of voters, that's what can happen. And looking at the distribution of who our voters were in terms of ideology, for instance, so looking at how big a core of our sample were labeled themselves as very, very liberal or moderate, it matches up with the exit polling from the 2008 election. So if you look at who we asked, it seemed to be, if anything, a slightly more progressive, slightly more liberal group of people than showed up in the 2008 election. And for age, we tried to be on point with age as well, and so we're pretty close to the exit poll numbers on age as well. So, you know, the nice thing about polling is that ultimately the voters decide, and they'll be the ones that'll tell us, you know, what really is going to happen. And I would say for everybody looking at polling and everybody considering what's going to happen in the Iowa caucus on the Democratic side, because of the rules the Democrats have in place, for instance, viability, 15% viability, it's not an easy thing to say, to translate, to say this number of, 70,000 people voted for Clinton, 85,000 people voted for Sanders, and 10,000 people voted for O'Malley. That's more how the Republicans do it. But with the way the Democrats do it at the precinct caucuses and allocating delegates based on a formula, they're not really going to report vote totals. You'll know how many people showed up, so turnout numbers. So it's very hard. It's not like you have a one-to-one correlation. And in some of those areas where Senator Sanders is particularly strong, so young voters and the rest, there may be very high turnout in some of those areas. But that does not necessarily translate to a one-for-one increase in the number of delegates that get won that evening on February 1st. So it'll be a very interesting night, and some of the polling's been pretty volatile, and I would imagine we're adding to that volatile mix here. And it happens if you conduct enough polls and you draw enough samples, and so you look for things. And presidential approval numbers for our Democratic sample looked right compared to what you would expect to find, as did things like I mentioned ideology. It was a very liberal and very progressive leaning sample that we got, and so I'll be as curious as anyone on February 1st to see what happens. So the voters have 10 days to figure everything out and prove everybody wrong. So there you go.